So let's talk about landscape photography. I started as a landscape photographer. I think that was my first genre. I do a lot of environmental portraits, but landscapes have a special place for me in my heart. And the thing is, it's a tool you're always going to want to know about. The material I'm going to go over with you is from my two books, Advancing Your Photography and The Secrets to Creating Amazing Photos Composition. So these are two books I've written. By the way, you can get these at a huge discount by going to this URL right here, advancingyourphotography.com. The first thing is visualization, as I mentioned, and it's defined as the power of forming a mental picture or vision of something not actually present to the sight. It turns out that photography starts with you, not with your camera, and it starts with you getting a vision of what you want to photograph. And let me show you kind of a visual of that. This is me visualizing a photograph on our rugged coastline called Big Sur, California. I don't have a camera in my hand. I'm visualizing what I want this photograph to look like. Then, having done that, I said, well, I don't want to be that close up. I want to go way farther back. I want clouds. I want to capture this bridge in the image. And in this case, I'm using a tripod. Tripods are actually really handy when you're shooting landscapes, and I'll tell you why, for a couple of reasons. One, I was able to get this self-portrait. I had another camera set up on a tripod, and if you look at my hand here, you may not see it, but there's a little clicker right there. So I'm actually photographing myself photographing. But what tripods do in terms of landscapes is they make you slow down. Most of the time when you're shooting a landscape, it isn't like a split-second thing. You've got a little time on your hands, and the tripod adds that element of carefully looking and slowing down. So in the old days of, big cameras like some of these back here behind me, you can't see, I've got a 4x5 over here. We use tripods, and you can kind of emulate that. So that's my first tip. Take a tripod with you. You may want to put yourself in the frame, which is also useful with a tripod, because then you can put it on a self-timer, walk into the frame, and make yourself part of the image. But once I did that, then I captured that photograph and I visualized it as a black and white photograph. I wanted those clouds. I wanted, I wanted this. Obviously, this bridge here was really important to me. It's called Bixby Creek Bridge, and I wanted to photograph this rugged coastline. So that changed from a color image to a black and white because that was my vision. And how do you develop? A lot of people ask me this. So, Mark, I get it. You want me to visualize. How do I develop my visual library? Well, one of the best ways is to look at art. And you can go to museums physically when they open up, or you can go to online galleries. Like this is from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Fantastic museum. I love these guys because they allow me to download really high resolution prints of these amazing artists. So this is our friend Rembrandt, and it's look at his clouds. Look at the use of the clouds. Look at the lighting, and look at how he placed. This is called a balance composition, where in the center here is this tree, and you get the idea that it's balanced by what's going on the left with this tree and what's going on over here. But if you really look at this, you can emulate this with your photographs. You can get those dark, moody skies. You can look for the lighting that's striking your center subject here. We can learn a lot from these artists. That is a big clue right there. Clue number 2. So I've talked about visualization. Now we're talking about go to museums or online galleries or books. Books are also great. And study that art. Don't just look at it, and glance at it, but really study it and find the artists that resonate the most with you and look at how they did it, and you'll learn a lot. We could do a whole class just on that. Train your eye to see images. They don't just jump out at you. You have to use, and we use this as a framing device, you have to train your eye to see photographs. And this is a very, very important skill that you can develop and continue to use. Look, if you're playing any sport, basketball, tennis, golf, surfing, whatever, what do? You do a lot of practice. How many times in basketball do they practice just making the shot, for a foul shot over and over and over? Well, you have to do the same thing with your eye. Train your eye to find images. Train your eye to see those images. They don't just jump out at you and wave big flags and say, hey, come on, Mark, press the shutter. You have to find those things, okay? By the way, as we're going through this, if you have a question, fire it away in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so training your eyes, we get to the 5 stages. I've already talked about that, visualization. Where do we go from there? Well, we go into composition, which is, capture. Framing is your basic tool you're going to use over and over again. What framing does is it gives you layers, it gives you contrast, and it leads the person's eye to where you want it to go. So this is in that same area. This is a frame built from this fence and the edge of this tree. And what happens here is that gives you a layer. That gives you a foreground layer, okay? And that adds contrast and depth. What we're trying to do with our photographs, they're 2-dimensional, but we're trying to make them appear 3-dimensional. And framing is a key tool to make that happen. Now, with that frame in the foreground, we can then look into the background. And our eye is just naturally drawn to leading it through. In this case, we have a leading line also going here with the road. And we'll talk about that particular leading line in a minute. But that's what framing does. And you want to constantly use that. There's lots of frames out there. There's, natural frames like I just showed you with a tree, or in this case, it was kind of a combination of a natural frame and a man-made frame. I'm going to go backwards here with the fence. There's doors that are great frames. There's trees that are frames. There's bridges and buildings and all sorts of things can form frames. Look for them all the time. This is another compositional tool, and it's really definitely got a huge use in landscape photography. It's called group shape composition. That's on you'll find it on page 66 of this book if you've got it. If you don't have it, you should get it. And there's this quote. This is a tremendously talented photographer, Camille Seaman, and she said, think of everything as shapes. You're arranging shapes in such a way to interact and to activate space, to push things forward and pull things back, to draw your eye here or guide your eye there. When you understand that and you do it in that way, composition becomes like a ballet. It really becomes choreography. This is important, you guys, because you may have to move around. Your landscape isn't going to move for you. It's not like a person where you can say, hey, would you mind moving over next to that tree? You can do that with people. Landscapes, you have to do the moving. But what she's saying is look at the shapes and move around until those shapes come together. This particular composition tool is called group shape composition. This is a photograph that I took in Hermanus, South Africa. And there's a lot of shapes here. There's many different shapes going on, and I'm going to break it down for you. So we have the clouds. That's a whole set of shapes right there, isn't it? Then we have the mountains on the left, another set of shapes. We have the mountains on the right, another set of shapes. And we put those all together and we get group shape composition. And I moved into where I framed it the way I wanted it. And I moved around a little bit because I wanted to get that sunset. I mean, the sunset's pretty amazing there. But that's group shape composition. It adds depth, it adds dimension, and it really will help you tell that story. So always look for how you can group those different compositional elements together. Is this making sense to you guys? You guys digging this? Okay. Another group shape composition with the added bonus of clouds. This is the Matterhorn. And the birds. So the birds form what we call a punctuation point. Now, imagine this photograph with no clouds, blue sky, and just the mountain. It'd be okay, right? But it would look like a postcard. If you wanted a postcard, why not just buy a postcard? If you want your own stamp on it, you want to put your thumbprint on your photograph, then you look for these other elements. I love clouds. In almost every landscape I take, I try to see how I can get clouds into it. I don't add them, by the way. These are not photoshopped in later, although there is a pretty cool, I haven't used it successfully. I've played with it, where you can add clouds and sky replacement, that sort of thing. I'm not a big believer in that, but that's just me. But I looked for this element of something else. A punctuation point gives you exactly what a punctuation point does in writing. It just helps highlight what your image is about. In this case, these two birds soaring really added to the image for me. And I waited for them. I try to use birds a lot in landscapes, or people, or animals, or even a car. I want some other element in there besides just the mountain, let's say. So that's another compositional tool. Look for weather, look for clouds, but look for those punctuation points. Please subscribe and enable the bell so you don't miss any of our new shows. Like the video and please share it and leave your comments. I love hearing from you. And remember to get out and capture your own images of life.